Hi, I'm Bethany in El Campo, Texas, and you're listening to Jaime Harrison on Two Broads Talkin' Politics.
Are you listening?
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I'm on today with Jaime Harrison, who has formed an exploratory committee to run for U.S. Senate in South Carolina. Hi, Jaime.
Hey, Kelly. How are you?
I'm great. How are things in South Carolina?
They're great. The weather's perfect, and we're ready to roll.
All right. So I wondered if maybe we could start with just if you could give me a little bit of background about you for people who don't know as much about you and why you're thinking about running for U.S. Senate.
Yeah. So currently, Kelly, I am the associate chair and counselor of the Democratic National Committee. I was the former chair, the first African-American chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. I served as chair for 4 years. I was vice chair for 2 years before that. I grew up here in South Carolina. My grandparents helped to take care of me, and partly because my mom was a child when she had me. She was 16 years old. She dropped out of high school, and my grandparents, who didn't have much education, took care of me. My grandmother was, in the Texas, but she finished 8th grade, and my grandfather was in the construction field and finished about 4th grade. But they were two of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life, and sort of it's important to do for your brother and your sister. It's important to fight for everybody, regardless of where they are. And so, I sort of grew up with that whole sense, and so I always wanted to be in public service. I always loved politics. I started very early when I was in high school volunteering on campaigns. I volunteered on the Clinton-Gore campaign. Then I interned with my Senator Fritz Hollins and interned with Congressman Clyburn. And then eventually I went to Capitol Hill and actually worked in Congressman Clyburn's office. I was, when he became the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, I was the executive director, the first African-American ever to be executive director for the House Democrats in the history of the Congress. And then when he became whip, I ran the whip operation for him and Nancy Pelosi. And so I've been very, very blessed, Kelly, with a remarkable experience working in politics. I even recently wrote a book about it. It's called Climbing the Hill, How to Build a Career in Politics and Make a Difference, which I sort of cataloged some of my stories about working on Capitol Hill. But it's been a great, great time. And the most important part of all of it is that I've had a great time making a difference, really helping to do things that improve the lives of the people in this nation. And for that, I am, I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity that I've had to do it.
You're in South Carolina, and South Carolina hasn't voted for a Democrat for statewide office for a while now. But you've been talking to lots of people. What are the kinds of things you're hearing? Do you think that South Carolinians, is that the word? South Carolinians are ready to vote for Democrats? What are the kinds of things that they're really concerned about right now?
Well, one of the things, the constant refrain I hear is, what has happened to Lindsey Graham? Mm-hmm. So many people ask me that. Lindsey was one of these people that many of us, and I raised my hand because he had me hoodwinked too, that at least, even though I disagreed with him on probably 95% of everything, I felt that he was at least someone who was a statesman, someone who could step above the political fray at times in order to do the right thing. But what he has demonstrated is that he's a chameleon. As George Will said, he's a political windsock, basically doing whatever he needs to do in order to make himself relevant and to keep himself in power. And so the thing that I think is resonating with a lot of South Carolinians is that they need somebody in Washington, D.C. who will just fight and represent them, not focused on whether or not you get a tea time with the president or whether you get invited to this special reception or whether you get a hit time on Fox News. But just as focus on the issues that they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so, I've been going around the state talking to people about some of those real issues, like the student loan debt crisis. I graduated from law school with $160,000 of debt. Now, when I talk to young people, that my debt pales in comparison to the debt that some of them are taking. And that's not sustainable. It is really not sustainable. And we got to figure something out to deal with that. We have issues in terms of environmental issues here in South Carolina. Water quality in some of our rural communities is abysmal. There's one community, the community of Denmark, South Carolina, where they've been putting a chemical in the water for years, and now we're thinking that it's leading to some health problems and a health crisis. There are communities in South Carolina where there's no fluoride fluorine in some of the water for some of these kids, and so it's impacting their dental health. So that's a huge issue in South Carolina. Infrastructure, another big issue. The fact that we have roads and bridges that are falling apart, and then some of our rural communities don't have any broadband. So you're asking kids who are growing up in those communities to compete against kids that have so many other opportunities. It's just not fair, and it's not equal, and they're not starting from the same starting line. So we need to address all of those things. And then most importantly, healthcare. Here in South Carolina, we're a state where Medicaid was not expanded. 4 rural hospitals have closed as a result of it. And that's impacting the quality of life for so many of our South Carolinians. And so that's something that needs to be addressed and changed.
The average age of U.S. senators is, something like 60. And you're, I believe, 43, just a couple years older than me. And, I know you've taught high school and you've worked with students who are looking at going to college. What are you hearing from sort of the young people in South Carolina? What does the youth energy look like there? And are people looking to have people who are younger and more representative of things that they're going through?
Yeah. Well, that right now, the millennial age group is the largest voting bloc in the country. Now, that doesn't say that they vote, and that's something that we need to address and work on. But right now, in terms of sheer numbers, they're the largest voting bloc in the country. Many of them want someone who can relate to them and the pressures that they're dealing with. My first forum was on the student loan debt crisis. As someone who's struggling with that and understand, I married a woman who also has her own student loans. So combined, we had $250,000 of student loan debt. That has a real impact on decisions that we make in our life. And that's something that young people are struggling with. Some of them are, instead of buying homes or getting married, are deciding to stay at home for a little while longer. They're deciding not to buy a home, but renting with friends. Or deciding on impacting their career choices. I understand that because I've lived it. I really do believe that, and if you look at the average age of our representation here in South Carolina and in Washington, D.C., we need someone who can bring a younger perspective, a different perspective to Washington, D.C., so that we can address some of those issues. One of the things that I have just realized the other day is, God willing, my sons will live to see 2100, right? So we need a senator that can work on building a South Carolina for the 22nd century. But sad to say, here in South Carolina, we're still fighting the wars of the 19th and the 20th centuries. And I believe that I can be that bridge, the bridge between the older generation and the younger generation. A bridge to move us forward so that we can prepare for South Carolina's success in the 21st and in the 22nd centuries.
Yeah, so following up on that, you mentioned your kids. I have little kids myself. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old son. And, there aren't that many members of the Senate, certainly, but even the House who have little kids. What kind of perspective does that bring as you're thinking about, being in office, as you're thinking about the important things that the Senate does?
And it's a lot of perspective. I mean, you take one issue that impacts us all, and I'm sure it has impacted you. It's just childcare, and the impact that has on decisions that you make and the careers that you engage in. It's such a huge issue, and it's so expensive. And we need to figure out what ways can the federal government step in order to help working families deal with this very expensive necessity. If you don't have some type of care system for your kids, you can't work. And if you can't work, then what happens to you and your family? I think having that perspective of understanding student loans and the impact that it has on your life, being able to understand technology and the importance, why broadband is so important to have in certain communities because of the necessity for various careers and just being plugged in. I think, having that sort of youthful energy and vitality and experience will be a good thing for the United States Senate. I think is a needed boost. I believe outside of maybe it's Tom Cotton, I would be one of the youngest people in the United States Senate if I were when I'm elected, as my wife tells me. Not yet, but when.
You've said that you have an exploratory committee. What does that sort of mean practically? What's the difference between having an exploratory committee for Senate and running for Senate?
Well, in my mind, Kelly, I am pretty much the exploration is done, and so at this point, it's somewhat semantics. But initially, why I launched this as an exploratory committee was partly because my wife and I just had we have a newborn. He just turned 4 weeks yesterday. And so, going into this, I knew I wanted to do this race, and I knew I needed to do this race. So, one, I wanted to talk to the people in South Carolina, but two, I also wanted to be able to spend some time with my wife and my newborn and our son in these early weeks. And so he's growing bigger and stronger, and my wife is doing well. And so very soon we will be making an announcement, transitioning this campaign. Excellent.
I'm happy to hear that. So, I think when people think about Lindsey Graham, the current senator, there's a lot of focus on sort of the national politics and what's going on with Trump and the Mueller report and those sorts of things. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of focus at all on sort of on the ground politics for real people. What is the balance, do you think, for a U.S. senator on sort of focusing on these big issues, these big important issues, but also focusing on serving the people back home?
It is so key, Kelly. It is so key. I just recently told a story to somebody about, so South Carolina, for as long as I could remember, our two senators were Fritz Hollins, who just recently passed away, and Strom Thurmond. Again, the politics were very different. Their histories were very different as it relates to many issues like race. But the thing that was not different between the two was the focus on constituent service. Their focus on helping people address the issues that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So as I told you, my mom was very young when she had me. So when she was about 18 or 19 years old, she was trying to find a job and wanted to, in order to take care of me, and she wanted to buy a home and all. So she wrote to both of her senators, and they both responded, and she said, I need your help. I'm a young mom. I have a young baby boy at home, and I need your help to find a job because I just can't find one. And so both senators reached out to her with their constituent liaisons. And in the end, it was Strom Thurmond's office that actually helped my mom find a job so that she could take care of me. And that's something my mom never forgot. But that's what our senators used to be. They used to be servants of the public. It's not just about having fancy speeches on the floor of the Senate. It's not just about committee hearings. It's about tackling issues that people are faced with on a day-to-day basis. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go a little old school on my campaign, and when I'm in the United States Senate, I'm going to go back to being a public servant, helping people deal with the many issues that they're struggling with, from housing to employment to just getting their Social Security and their disability. That's what people in South Carolina really need help on. And then at the same time, focusing on the things that are impacting these people. As I mentioned, Denmark, South Carolina is a place where they found out that the water quality has been bad for a number of years because of them inserting chemicals into the water systems. Instead of Lindsey Graham writing to the EPA and demanding that the EPA administrator come down and help address this issue, Lindsey's too focused on his tea times with President Trump. That's not what we need. He's focused on his hit times on Fox News. That's not what we need. We need a U.S. Senator who will just focus on the people every morning, every midday, every night. And that's what I will commit to do when I'm elected Senator of South Carolina.
So you have some experience with the DNC and being in South Carolina. I'm sure there's lots of presidential candidates coming through there right now. What do you see as sort of the national, where are the Democrats at? Feels like a lot of sort of important decisions that Democrats need to be making now about kind of where to focus energy and what kinds of candidates we're looking for. What is your sense of sort of the overall picture of the Democratic Party right now?
I'm very, very proud of the Democrats that we have, particularly our candidates running for president. One, in 2018, we were able to achieve something that many people thought was not possible in terms of taking back the House. I think in 2020, we need to make sure that we're focused on retaining our majority in the House, picking up the majority in the Senate, and winning back the White House. And right now we have a field, what it's at 20 or 21, I can't remember. It'll probably be 22 tomorrow. But we have a large field of very accomplished, amazing candidates. Every one of them is a champion in of themselves. And so I'm very, very proud of them. But, I just talked with a reporter the other day, and he said, well, what is it that how are people going to choose from such a large field? And part of it, I believe, on the policies, we're talking about shades of gray, right, in terms of the differences between these candidates. They are all in the same ballpark as it relates to. They all believe that there should be health care for all. Now, how that health care is dispersed, that's where the differences are. They all believe in terms of a living wage and making sure that people can take care of their families. They all believe in the importance of education and investing in our education systems. They are all really in the same area and ballpark as it relates to policy. In the end of the day, I think what it's going to be is that folks are going to search their, as I say, when people go to vote, they not only use their heads, but they also use their heart and their guts. And in essence, they're going to search their heart and their gut and find out which of these candidates that they really relate to, that really inspires them and motivates them to go out and do that extra bit of call time, to knock on a few extra doors, to send in another $5 or $10 to help out. We need to find, and Democrats win when we have candidates that are hopeful, that are aspirational, and that can motivate us to be better than what we believe we can be. And I think in the end of the day, we will find that candidate, and that candidate will beat Donald Trump in the 2020 election.
If our listeners would like to help out your campaign for Senate, how can they do that?
Go to my website, JaimeHarrison.com, and Jaime is spelled like Jaime. So it's JaimeHarrison.com. Feel free to go and sign up there. There are a lot of options. And, you can even send me a personal email. Send it to Jaime, Jaime, @JaimeHarrison.com. Would love to read messages from your listeners. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, you can also go on the website and donate, which, we're going against a guy who already has $4 million cash on hand, who Donald Trump has pledged to come and campaign for and with. And so, we're going to be the David versus a Goliath. But I think it can happen. And I know it can happen. But it's only if we can get people, all people, not only folks here in South Carolina, but across the country, focused on taking down Lindsey Graham. It's time to send him home. All
right. Is there anything else you want to make sure we talk about?
No, Kelly, I think that's it. I mean, this campaign is going to be very interesting. We're going to go out. We're going to do service projects. We're going to be in the community. We're going to try to take an unconventional approach to, again, demonstrate that we need to go back to having public servants serve in the United States Senate, people who are focused on dealing with people and helping those people deal with the issues that they're and challenges that they're faced with on a day-to-day basis.
All right. And I look forward to hearing what you think about the next couple episodes of Game of Thrones as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I got one message from somebody who's like, I don't think a candidate needs to talk about Game of Thrones. I'm a very real person. So if that's something that's on my mind, I'm going to tweet about it. I mean, it is. I love Game of Thrones. It's been a very interesting series. I read the books and just was enamored. And so I'm going to be sad to see the series end.
Well, I agree with your take, by the way. I also think Sansa ends up on the Iron Throne.
There you go.
All right. Well, Jaime, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I'm sure you're very busy, especially with a newborn at home. But I'm just really excited about your campaign, and I'm excited to take down Lindsey Graham.
Thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate it. And thank you for reaching out to me, too. I really, really appreciate that. And give my best to Sophie.
All right. Will do.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Wethlin and was created for use by this podcast.